The image of a cavalcade of cars driven by rejoicing Syrian nationals in Ballahadreen in the west of Ireland last weekend remains etched in my memory. It seems appropriate that on the third weekend of Advent, known as Gaudete Sunday, that we rejoice with the Syrian people as they see the back of a cruel regime. Tweeter Jason O'Mahony this week tweeted, "I know nothing about Syria other than Assad was a monster." Robert Fisk, the stunningly brave journalist, once wrote, "I had over decades written dozens of long analyses of Syrian history, its treatment by the Ottomans, and then by the French, whose colonial instincts were to infect Syria as surely as they spread the virus of sectarianism." Fisk exclaims, "Syria, I often recalled, was always accused of being expansionist. Yet its experience was one of territorial amputation and loss. First came the one-armed French general Henry Gouraud, who tore Lebanon from Syria in 1920 and gave it to pro-French Christians. Then Paris handed the Syrian coastal city of Alexandretta to the Turks in 1939 in the hope that Turkey would join the Allies against Hitler. Then, in the Six-Day War of 1967, Syria lost the Golan Heights, subsequently annexed by Israel. Most of us can probably remember that in 2011, the Damascus regime of Bashar al-Assad would be driven out of more than half of Syria itself. The terrifying civil war was therefore not only about the survival or destruction of a brutal regime, it was also an attempt by the country's rulers to prevent the final division of Syria at the hands of the Turks, Kurds, and Americans, and indirectly Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf kingdoms. They would use ISIS and other Islamists in an effort to destroy Assad. His allies would come from the Shiite Lebanese Hezbollah, Shiite Iran, and the Shiite militias of Iraq and Afghanistan, and from Russia. The great American journalist Seymour Hersh once coaxed, "When people ask me how to begin an investigation, I always say to them, read, read, read." I have spent recent weeks reading Robert Fisk's Night of Power, The Betrayal of the Middle East. Fisk died in 2020 in Ireland during COVID-19. And before he died, he wrote, "COVID-19, unless it suddenly turns into a tiger, will be seen as just another risk to human life, like car crashes, cancer, and war. Humans don't necessarily fight disease, injustice, and sorrow. They just survive and bash on regardless." The British First World War Prime Minister David Lloyd George once said of that conflict that if people really knew the truth, the war would be stopped tomorrow. But of course, they don't know and can't know. Robert Fisk believed differently. He revealed through his courageous journalism the terrible things that happen in war and identified those responsible for these horrors. John the Baptist in Luke's Gospel engages skillfully with the public square, offering truth and counsel to the crowds, tax collectors, and soldiers. Both John the Baptist and Robert Fisk were unafraid to criticize authority and unpick complex truths. John the Baptist hypens our expectations about the advent of God in our world. He points towards Christ, who came not to offer a doctrine, but a journey on which we continually learn to transform our humanity, our way of being human, including all our relationships. The prophet Zephaniah, who features in the first reading, was convinced that God perpetually renews us in his love. Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, encourages people to rejoice in prayer and petition. At a time of global instability and haunting hate, it is helpful to gently assert that to be a Christian is to persistently open one's heart and realize that Jesus is now, today, in 2024, rising from the dead. Rooted in this outlook, we both rejoice and worry with the people of Syria, hoping that world citizens and their leaders begin to grasp that our lives depend on other lives and upon processes and energies in one interlocking system. Advent steers us away from just bashing onwards, persuading us to take the time to connect with the one who gives us being. Amen.